Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we are rebinging Star Trek Voyager from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 1, Episode 5, Phage. This episode aired February 6th, 1995. Before we talk about this one, do you have anything to say about last week's episode, which was Time and Again?
I think we all learned an important lesson not to mess with polaric energy.
I think what we learned is that Janeway can wear stripes or solids, and she still looks great. And she's still the boss. You know, as we've been going through these first couple of episodes, because the first one was marked on Paramount Plus as 1 and 2, we sort of skipped 2, right, and jumped right to 3. But I was looking at IMDb yesterday, and they made Caretaker Episode 1 and Parallax Episode 2. So now we're off with IMDb.
Oh, wow.
It's very confusing. Everybody's going to be confused.
What episode number is this?
Maybe 5 or 4, depending on which tool you're looking at.
I think that happened with Season 1 of Deep Space Nine as well.
It did happen somewhere in there, and it's very confusing when you're trying to just put numbers on the podcast.
Right. So what number is this one going to be?
I don't know. Just, go to the next one and the next one, and don't worry about it.
Yeah, numbers don't matter. Well, we're recording this on Boxing Day.
Boxing Day and our wedding anniversary, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Well, why wouldn't we, on our anniversary, spend the day talking about Star Trek? I mean, it makes perfect sense.
That really does make good sense.
I saw somebody once on Twitter saying that they were a big Star Trek fan and their spouse or their significant other was not. And they were saying, it's totally fine. You can still have a happy marriage. And I was like, I don't think you can. I'm not sure how that works.
It's probably frightening how much of our life has actually revolved around Star Trek.
Yeah, especially since this podcast started.
Yes, the enjoyment of it.
Yeah, but we've talked about it before, right? Early in our relationship, we started watching Star Trek together.
Yes, that's very true.
Well, I have the notes this week, so should we get going?
Over to you.
In the cold open, Voyager is headed towards a rogue planetoid, which is apparently a source of raw dilithium, at least according to Neelix. They'll need to build some kind of refinery on board to process the raw dilithium, and Chakotay tells Janeway that Lieutenant Torres has requested permission to start making modifications to the auxiliary impulse reactor. This makes Janeway laugh because she's sure that B'Elanna goes out of her way to come up with solutions that ignore Starfleet procedures. But rather than quash the idea, she says she wants regular reports.
B'Elanna thinking outside the box. However, maybe some of these protocols are in place because of inherent dangers or accidents that happened in the past?
Yeah, well, that would be the concern.
Right. There's only a 50% chance that refining dilithium through the secondary reactor will blow the ship up.
Or maybe taking away the use, like the main use of it being the auxiliary impulse reactor will be the problem.
Oh, good point. And they don't really cover where Starfleet protocols are. We just do it this way versus there's a very good reason we do it this way.
No. I mean, we cover it sometimes in very specific situations when something goes wrong. But we don't talk about why this might be a bad idea.
Like why you don't use polaric energy.
I feel like Janeway is the scientist, though. She knows.
Yeah.
She knows exactly what's going on here. Well, she's walking and talking with Chakotay, and she was on her way to breakfast. And she gives a little wish list of what she'd like to eat for breakfast. And it's like a fancy Sunday brunch, which I really liked.
Yeah, it sounded pretty good.
Yeah, but she says she knows she's having ration pack number 5, stewed tomatoes and dehydrated eggs. Ugh.
Wow.
That made the gag reflex kick into gear.
Could there be a singularly less inspiring breakfast?
I already don't like overcooked eggs. Imagine them dehydrated, and then you throw tomatoes in there, which I just find disgusting. At this point, it's like, just give me a pill or something to get my nutrients. I'm not eating that.
I remember listening to a Marine online talking about MREs and things he had to eat out in the field, and him basically going through a list of the ones that were good and bad. And I can't remember which one it was. He mentioned one and was like, never, ever eat that. Just don't. Ugh. This made me think of that.
Well, Janeway enters a room that we find out later is her private dining room. Didn't even know she had one. Only to find Neelix cooking and the room full of smoke. And he tells her that he basically converted this room into a galley. And he's been scavenging things from around the ship to make it work.
Yep.
Janeway clearly irritated, is like following him around and asking him who approved of this work. And he's like, oh, nobody. Then she points out this is her private dining room, and now he's turned it into something else entirely.
I would ask, how did he get access
Yeah,
to
how
it?
did he get the door open? Exactly.
And if you notice, there's a load of other Starfleet personnel in there.
Yeah, he's just let everybody in.
Surely somebody would have happened to mention it. Oh, this is the captain's dining room?
Yeah, maybe he followed the cleaning crew in or something. I don't know.
I could see how a captain might want a room like this of, look, I just want to eat my breakfast. I just want it to be quiet.
Yeah.
And I don't want anything, to bother me. I just want that 5 minutes of peace before the rest of a workload starts kicking in.
But really, if you think about it, if all your food comes from a replicator, I'm not sure why you need a separate room.
Yeah.
When you already have an office and quarters, why do you need a separate dining area? And the quarters on this ship, I don't remember, but I don't think they're tiny.
Right.
It's not like she just has a bunk bed.
The other thing I would think is this would be for like formal dining, like if you're having an admiral or another captain or something like that.
Now that would make sense. Yeah.
If there's a naval tie-in, I remember, and I might be wrong on this, something about like the captains on aircraft carriers basically lived on the bridge, and they even had like a room that they could sleep in. But they were always like basically on the bridge. So I would wonder if Starfleet would be set up more like that.
Yeah. We never addressed if Picard had one.
Yeah.
But Picard, you never saw him eating with other people. But we saw Kirk with his chicken sandwich and coffee just eating in the mess hall. Yeah.
The Kirk lunches, I call it. One of my favorites.
Before she can get too annoyed, Chakotay calls her to the bridge, so she doesn't even really get to eat her dehydrated eggs. And on top of that, she's annoyed. I hate when something annoys me at work before I've even had breakfast. That's really terrible.
Well, Neelix did set the whole thing up like a full galley. It looked kind of like almost like a street kitchen.
Yeah, but when was the last time she was in here? I mean, he didn't just do that in the last 24 hours. Right. Something funny about this whole thing.
Well, that's where I wonder about is this where she goes when she wants I need 5 minutes of peace just to eat my horrible eggs?
Maybe. On the bridge, they've arrived at the planetoid and are scanning it. I always think it's funny when we're surprised that we arrive somewhere, when we would have known exactly we were going to get here. Like, it doesn't even make any sense that she wouldn't have had time for her eggs, because she would have known how far away they were when she went into that room.
I believe a lot of this is the era before navigation on everything.
Maybe. Okay. Well, scans can't seem to identify how much dilithium is actually on the planetoid, so Chakotay is going to take Harry and check it out. I do like here that Janeway's like, oh yeah, you take this one. This mission sounds boring. I don't want to go down there.
Yeah, this is a mission on the boring scale. I'm not doing that one.
Doesn't involve a phaser.
Yeah.
I'll just stay here. Meanwhile, Neelix invites himself along on the away mission because he's been preparing for it in between his building his little chef's kitchen, I guess.
Yeah.
Down on the planetoid, we're once again happy to find it's a Class M, so no need for environmental costumes. Environmental suits. Chakotay, Neelix, and Harry are looking around, taking scans, and you just know that Neelix is going to get into trouble. I mean, it's clear from the beginning. And just like that, a cave wall behind Neelix morphs into a long, industrial-looking hallway, and we see a figure at the far end walking towards us.
Yeah, this sort of guy creeping around at the back.
Yeah. And we're not sure at this point if we're seeing into a ship or what we're seeing, but it looks dangerous, and we cue the theme song. Now we're scanning like crazy, but we're not finding any dilithium. They're finding signatures, but no formations. Apparently that's important. Yeah. And they've all sort of split up. So Neelix calls saying he's found something, a big cavern where he's reading a huge dilithium formation. Chakotay tells him to stay put because it's out of the search radius. But of course, he just wanders into the cavern and ends up finding nothing.
Right.
Chakotay is ready to get off this rock, but then Neelix finds traces of organic energy and he continues to ignore Chakotay's orders. And the wall behind him opens up again, and the dark figure jumps out of sight before Neelix can see him. But then the guy appears behind Neelix and shoots him with some kind of energy weapon that looks a bit like a taser.
Yes, it does.
And by the time Chakotay and Harry find Neelix, the bad guy's gone and Neelix is convulsing on the ground. They beam up to sickbay on Voyager, and the doctor says Neelix is going into a coma, and he puts some kind of device on his head to keep him alive temporarily. But the doctor says he's going to die because his lungs have been removed.
Right.
And you're like, I'm sorry, what?
And we go into Spock's Brain, Neelix edition.
Well, there's a dramatic ad break here, of course. And now we have Janeway telling Chakotay, this is why I don't let you run away missions. No, that's not really what happened. Really, she's asking how someone could have removed his organs so quickly, which is a great question.
Yeah.
And Chakotay says they were actually transported out of his body.
That was kind of impressive.
I mean, that's wild. And it's also one of the reasons why transporter technology isn't something to be trifled with.
Right.
Imagine Ferengis using it to steal organs and sell them on some black market or something.
Yeah, they'd be stealing anything they could.
Somewhere along the way in the Deep Space Nine podcast, we talked about how this is how you would just kidnap people. And, when they're walking down the street and they don't have shields up. Transporter technology is actually very silly.
Well, that was how the Cardassians kidnapped Kira.
Yeah.
In Second Skin.
Mm-hmm. My point is it would be happening all the time.
Well, yeah. The Ferengi could sell personal transporter blockers.
That's a good idea.
They could make some money off that. Yeah.
Yeah, like people who have a cell phone scrambler kind of thing.
Exactly. And it wouldn't matter if they worked.
No, it really wouldn't.
In fact, if it was the Ferengis, I'd be almost certain it wouldn't actually work.
Good point. Harry now is checking Neelix's tricorder, and he finds evidence of this dude and some other technobabble that he says.
Yeah.
And the doctor says we can't do anything to help Neelix unless we find his actual lungs.
Yes.
I found this a little confusing because it's too complex to replicate the lungs, but somehow if we get them back, we'll just put them back where they were, no problem. I mean, the whole thing is quite silly.
The doctor's a very good surgeon. So let's go into some overanalysis here.
Okay.
So they have replicator technology that can build almost anything at a molecular level. So why couldn't it replicate Neelix's lungs?
Yeah, because later we find out they have a scan from him from the last time he transported.
Yep.
So yes, I agree. I thought this was a little bit
extreme hand wavy. Yeah.
And he tried to give a whole complicated reason about why, he couldn't do it. And maybe he would be able to do it if it was someone who he had the full medical records of.
Yeah.
Because, he's made that story a few times. So maybe it's that. I don't know. But the transporter has to do a full scan.
Right. I feel that's a little bit of a forced story there, because you could easily sort of get around it by saying that to make something, you need an accurate program to make it. So, perhaps it takes weeks or months plus the fine tuning to write a program.
And they don't have time.
It's not that they can't replicate it.
Yeah.
They don't have time and they don't have a schematic.
Yeah, that would have been better. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like if the doctor said, we can do it. I need 3 techs, unlimited computer time and a replicator, and we'll whip up a set of lungs in 6 to 8 months.
Right.
And as it involves software, it'll probably take twice as long. And there'll be a caveat of don't breathe in too hard, Neelix, or your lungs will explode.
Yeah. Doesn't work when it's raining.
Yeah.
Well, Janeway's heard enough, and she's going back to the planet with security personnel this time.
Well, it's got interesting, hasn't it?
Oh, of course, because now she can go with a phaser, so she's ready to go.
It's an exciting mission.
Back down in the cave, Janeway finds a warm spot on a cave wall, and she just pulls out her phaser and fires at it.
No messing around.
Revealing the corridor we saw earlier. I mean, she's such a person of action. It's so funny.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, there's a warm spot on the wall. Let's just shoot it. What? I'm sure that's going to reveal something.
I'm sure that's not standard Starfleet protocol.
Yeah. Remember, I think I said this last week, but back when Atiba was on and he was telling us that he thought Janeway was so by the book, I'm like, I don't think he's watched this show. This is by the Janeway book is what this is.
This might be the Kirk book.
Maybe. Well, back up in sickbay, things are going badly, and Tom has to replicate some medical equipment, which gives the doctor the chance to insult his uselessness, which is just his favorite activity. But at least Tom is trying. I mean, maybe he's not good at it, but it's not like he's not the one complaining.
There's a side to the doctor that
he doesn't like boys. That's the side to the doctor. We'll see if that's true in the rest of the show. Kes volunteers to donate a lung, but since she's not Talaxian, the doctor says that isn't going to work. He says we need a way to oxygenate his blood supply, and then he starts brainstorming ways to help Neelix by using the transporter matrix and getting the exact specifications for his lungs. He's thinking of creating a pair of holographic lungs using his emitter array. Tom argues with him, and the doctor slaps him across the face just to show that the magnetic containment field that creates the illusion of his body can be modulated to not allow matter to pass through it, which was very funny.
I question the doctor's techniques here.
Yeah, he could have just tapped him or something.
Yeah,
no, he slaps him hard
on the
across
nose.
the face because he does not like Tom. Kes wants more info before agreeing to this plan, and the doctor says this is Neelix's only chance of survival, and he'll have to stay completely unmoving until his actual lungs are found. And if they're never found, he's going to have to stay like that forever.
I think it shows that the doctor is quite a problem solver here. This is a pretty advanced hologram if it's actually making these kind of leaps in problem solving. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's at least got machine learning.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have to, I guess, to be effective. Otherwise, it would relearn things every time you reopened it, right?
Oh, right. Right. So it would have to learn effectively. Here's a question, though. So he says Neelix would have to stay there for the rest of his life. Well, while Neelix is in that, couldn't you be working on a way to actually replicate his real lungs on a design that you could replicate? So it'd be like, look, Neelix, it's going to take us 6 months. You just got to stay in there.
Well, and maybe that's what would happen.
Yeah.
Realistically. And maybe that's what the doctor is doing every time he's sitting at his desk. I don't know.
Here's another idea. Neelix must have a homeworld. Couldn't you go to Neelix's homeworld and see if they have a spare set of lungs?
Or if they can get one from someone.
Yeah.
Why don't we do that? We don't even talk about that.
Right.
Ultimately, we don't really care that much about Neelix. It's just, you just sit over there. We have a whole story going on over here. Well, Tom quietly says to Kes that it sounds grim, but this way, at least Neelix will be alive until we find a better solution. See, he's thinking.
Maybe Tom should act as an interface between the doctor and actually talking to people.
Yeah, the doctor thinks that it should be Kes, but I think Tom could do it. Tom asks Kes what Neelix would want, and she says she's not sure, but she knows that she wants him alive.
That makes one.
Down in that scary dark corridor that Janeway found, we find a creepy dark lab, which Tuvok says is the source of the dilithium readings.
Yep.
The room is running on an unusual dilithium matrix, so it turns out there are no dilithium deposits on this planetoid. It looks like the room is full of organs in containers, which makes me think of the X-Files rather than Star Trek.
I like here how Tuvok starts going through all the items he's been scanning.
Yeah.
And Janeway tells him, save the cataloging for later.
Yeah, I don't think we need a full inventory, dude.
Yeah, but for a Vulcan, this must be really exciting. Oh, lots of things to classify and catalog. If they showed emotion, I think this is something they'd get pretty excited about.
Well, unfortunately, in this big room of various things, Neelix's lungs are not found. They find another door that opens into a different part of the cave, and they start chasing after life signs. I kept thinking during this whole scene as they're running around, it's like, be careful, somebody might beam your lungs out of your bodies. Like, I don't know. I never think we're careful enough.
Yeah, there seems to be a lack of caution.
Well, they finally find the scary dude, and Tuvok gets off a shot, but the dude still gets away.
Yeah.
Janeway picks up his device, which he dropped before he disappears into a wall, just as Chakotay calls to say, a ship has left the planet, and immediately went to warp. Janeway says, get us out of here, and lay in a course to pursue.
So the guy took a blast from a phaser, and it didn't even slow him down. He just dropped his taser.
No.
That's pretty impressive.
In sickbay, we put something onto Neelix to freeze him in place, and then we put the holographic lungs in place, and his toxicity level increases to 95% before it starts decreasing, and then Neelix seems to start breathing.
Now, don't your lungs move when you breathe?
This is my next note. He's breathing, he's moving. He's talking, he's moving. They make this whole point of how he absolutely cannot move. He's moving. You should have put him in a coma then, if he wasn't supposed to move, but he's moving.
I wonder, does the doctor just mean where the blood vessels attach on the lungs?
Yeah, maybe.
That's questionable, isn't it?
Yes. Well, eventually, Neelix is awake, which again means he starts talking, which means he's moving. But he's obviously not thrilled with his predicament, and we get a really close-up of his wacky eyebrows. Yeah. They're like 3 or 4 inches high, and they just go into chaos above his eyes. And then he starts complaining about the way the ceiling looks. Tom says he's heading back to the bridge, and he places a comforting hand on Kes's shoulder, only for Neelix to exhibit a ton of jealousy in this scene.
Yeah.
It's like, you have so many other things to worry about right now. I mean, jealousy, this kind of jealousy, it's not a good look on anyone, but it's really bad right here in this moment.
I think what they were attempting to do here, and failed miserably, was to show that Neelix was terrified.
Yeah.
And he's sort of showing his frustration or anger at Kes here.
Yeah.
What they managed to do instead is turn it into a dangerously jealous, possessive boyfriend. That should be an absolute red flag for Kes here.
100% red flag.
Yeah.
If that's what they're trying to do, okay, but they do that better later.
Yes.
But here in this moment, it's not good. Because he also, he uses some emotional blackmail saying she should just let him die, and just go with her new boyfriend or whatever. It's ridiculous.
It was a poorly written scene. The problem was it was executed well. So it came off as just like this awful boyfriend.
Yeah. Well, now we find B'Elanna has been examining the device that they found in the cave. And it's a complex medical device and surgical instrument that stuns the victim and does a microcellular analysis. And Janeway is like, great. Why does this thing even exist? What are we doing with this thing? Well, we're stealing lungs, is what we're doing.
It's the best lung stealer there is. Wouldn't you want to immediately give this to the doctor and start pulling out the useful technology that's within it?
Yeah, that would have been a good idea.
Right. If you could integrate that into the doctor systems and things, you have just advanced your medical science by decades, centuries. Yeah. I feel they're missing an opportunity to pick up useful technology on the way.
Yeah, agreed. Well, the alien ship that they've been chasing finally slows down and enters what looks like an asteroid, though it doesn't scan as natural. And then we get this cool interaction between Janeway and Tuvok when Janeway starts asking about the interior of the asteroid, and Tuvok says he wants to caution her against doing what she's about to do. Janeway's like, how do you know what I'm about to do? Tuvok claims he could describe in detail the psychological observations he's made over the 4 years that they've been together, which leads him to conclude she's about to take the ship into the asteroid. Janeway says, one of these days, I'm going to surprise you, Tuvok, but not today. That made me laugh out loud. I thought that was very funny.
I like the way Tuvok is acting as a note of caution in a similar way to, like in the first episode where Tuvok gave his opinion about how she should use the array to get them back. And she's like, thank you for your suggestion. I'm going to do it anyway. And Tuvok accepts that from his captain and continues.
Yeah. So far, I greatly prefer this first officer for Janeway to the one that she has on Prodigy who just tells her she's too emotional, which kept irritating me.
Yeah, that guy needs to be redshirted. I'm sorry.
Maybe from Tuvok's point of view, absolutely everything is too emotional.
Oh, well,
he just doesn't choose to say it every time.
That's true. From his perspective as a Vulcan, he is surrounded by emotional creatures.
Right. Then she rather arrogantly says she's already considered all other options, which I thought was funny. It's like, why do you have a team if you're the one doing all of the thinking?
Well, sometimes I think the captain needs to exude that confidence.
Yeah, but...
Or do you think that was too much of a, look, there's my way or everybody shuts up?
I don't know. I mean, you could at least discuss it.
Yeah.
This is really the Kirk in her, I think, to me, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's not just something where we sort of talked about that over the course of the show, she maybe becomes more aggressive and less by the book. But I mean, she is pretty aggressive right from the beginning.
Yeah.
I see when you're in a really urgent moment, it's good to show confidence and make decisions and not delay. But was this a super urgent moment, or could they have had a discussion?
Or could she have phrased it differently and saying, I accept your inputs, everyone, but this is what we're doing?
Yeah. It's her right to do that. I'm not disputing it. It's just not always a great leadership technique to say, I've already thought of everything. None of the rest of you could have had another idea.
You know who did that? Pinar from last week's episode. Nothing could go wrong.
Oh, right. The faux terrorist. After the ad break, we head into the asteroid. And of course, lots of things are causing the sensors not to work.
Yep.
And the cave is getting more and more narrow, but Tom keeps flying. Back in sickbay, Kes has decorated Neelix's surroundings to try and make him more comfortable, but he's starting to panic, saying he feels like he's all alone. The doctor says, you are alone. I'm just a hologram. He's very funny.
They've written a lot of great dialogue for the doctor from the start.
Yeah, I agree. This is a claustrophobic person's worst nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
Like, after I had back surgery and I couldn't move, I had a total panic attack on the first night. And, I mean, I was physically able to move, I just couldn't get up. And in this case, it's so much worse. He's not able to move anything. He starts to say he needs to get out, and he demands the doctor let him out. But the doctor tells him to calm down, which never works.
Yeah.
And then he starts gasping for air, and the doctor says he's hyperventilating. And eventually, he just gives him a shot and knocks him out.
Yeah, he's fully panicking.
Oh, yeah.
The use of the music here was really something. After the doctor sedates him, the look on his face, this seemed to be a scenario he really wasn't programmed for. And it seemed to basically shock him. And it was almost like after he sedated him, it was like, what am I doing?
Yeah. Either he was doubting the entire course of action, or he was doubting his ability to deal with Neelix, right? And to deal with this very realistic situation with him panicking. Yeah.
It could have been either of the two, but it really came off well in that performance. You sort of saw the Doctor being disturbed by having to do this.
Yeah.
I guess it's the nature of a 45-minute show that Neelix
You got to move it along. Yeah.
would start panicking immediately.
Yeah. Back on the bridge, Janeway is pacing as they enter a sort of hall of mirrors, and they see Voyager and the alien ship reflected multiple times. And Janeway is just not interested in caution at this point, and they keep following the ion trail of the ship, even though it might be a trap.
Yeah.
It's like she's lost all patience.
I think she might be working on the principle of it's easier for me to get out of a trap.
I guess.
Then
wait.
Yeah.
The doctor asks Kes to remain in sickbay so that he's not on his own when Neelix wakes up again. And then he starts lamenting that he is on call 24 hours a day, has no nurse, no counselor to help him. He wasn't programmed for this type of work. He says he's an emergency medical supplement, but Kes thinks that he's performed remarkably considering the situation. She says it wasn't a computer program that saved Neelix, it was the doctor. And she asks if he's capable of learning, and he says he is. And he's, again, touched by her sensible nature and suggests that maybe she consider a career in medicine, just because she's nice to him.
Well, she also has a much better bedside manner than the doctor.
She does.
And I liked how she gave him basically a pep talk.
She did.
It was sort of funny having a physical character giving the hologram moral support.
Well, and especially when you consider that she's basically a child.
Well,
she's so young, with a short life.
Yeah, but it seemed that race must have reached maturity very quickly.
I see.
They're like Jango Fett clones.
Oh, okay. Down in engineering, something is draining power from the warp core. Harry identifies where the drain is coming from, and Janeway suggests that we just fire at it, of course.
It was some kind of dampening field.
Tuvok says a phaser would just ricochet unpredictably, so Janeway says, okay, maybe we don't do that. But Chakotay has an idea that maybe firing such a beam could help find the other ship. Setting the phasers to a minimal setting and firing would mean the beam would continue to reflect off the bulkheads until it encountered a non-reflective material like the alien ship, for example.
Good plan.
And Janeway just goes, do it. And we immediately see beams flying everywhere like lasers protecting a piece of art in a museum.
That was a nice effect.
Yeah.
That was a good visual effect there.
And we find the real ship very quickly with 2 life signs on board. And Janeway says, beam those dudes on board ASAP. And we rush down to find 2 very unattractive looking creatures.
Awesome makeup.
They look like their faces are melting off. And they've got various things sort of taped to themselves, sort of holding their skulls together.
Yeah.
And they say they're gathering replacement organs because it's the only way they have to fight the Phage, a virus that attacked their people over 2 millennia ago.
Yeah, they're members of the Vidians Sodality.
That's the name of the people?
Yeah, which I thought was an interesting name. I'm going to have to go and look up what a Sodality is now. I didn't do it.
I was too focused on, we just beamed a virus right into the ship. No problem.
Deep Space Nine did it all the time. They were fine. Well, mostly fine.
Well, we learned that the Phage consumes their bodies and destroys their genetic code. Janeway is not amused that they're harvesting organs from others.
Yes.
And the one guy says it's their only way to survive.
So these guys are basically like space vampires.
Yes. She insists that Neelix's lungs be returned immediately, but guy number 1 says those organs have already been chemically altered and grafted into the body of guy number 2, and guy number 2 says it's guy number 1's job to find the organs that he needs to survive. He says they try to extract them from the dead, but sometimes they must act more aggressively. Yikes.
Can I vote to just shoot these 2 and take the organs back?
Yeah, I'm sure the doctor could chemically alter them back. Janeway says, now I'm left with the same choice you made, whether to commit murder to save a life or allow my own crewman to die while you breathe air through his lungs. Guy number 2 says he's sure it's impossible to understand how a civilized people could come to this. Before the Phage, they were educators and explorers with great artistic achievements. But if the consequences of his act are a death sentence, so be it. He says at least it will put an end to his suffering.
Interesting, because that's kind of a parallel to Neelix's freaking out, where he just wanted the lungs to be turned off. He wanted out of that machine, even if it would kill him. And this guy is sort of from a similar point saying, okay, if it kills me, then at least the suffering's over.
Well, you could have made that choice before killing someone else.
That would have been a good one.
Janeway starts pacing angrily now, saying, I don't have the freedom to kill you to save another. She's very annoyed.
She seems very agitated. Again, it's that sort of Janeway just holding back that anger. And I really like how Kate Mulgrew manages to do that.
Agreed. She says she would turn them over to the authorities for trial, but she has no ability to do that either because they're out here on their own. Yeah. She says, I see no other alternative but to let you go. But she tells them to take a message to their people. If I encounter your people again, I will do whatever is necessary to protect my crew from you. Any further actions against this ship or this crew will be met with the deadliest of force.
I'm going to go on a limb here and say these people aren't going to listen. They're desperate for survival. They're not going to follow that advice.
Yeah, they don't care about you.
I think the best thing she can do is actually lock them in the brig because...
Yeah, they'll be dead soon.
Yeah, exactly.
The guy with Neelix's lungs, that's guy number 2, asks to see Neelix. He says maybe their medical abilities are superior and they can somehow help. So off to sickbay we go, to spread this virus all over the ship.
It's not everywhere yet.
Dude number 1 now puts his big taser-like thing over Neelix, saying the simulated organs are primitive. And then he starts scanning everyone else in the room, saying the others are healthy enough for organ transplant. The doctor protests, but the taser guy says his surgical knowledge is superior, and all they need to do is adapt Neelix's immunogenicity.
Okay, overanalysis.
Sure.
So if he can convert any set of lungs to Neelix using his superior technology, why can't the doctor replicate a pair of human lungs and have this guy graft them onto Neelix?
Well, yeah. That's a good question.
There's a small plot hole here.
Wait, no, they were saying that anyone could volunteer. He was saying that.
Yes. The doctor said Neelix's lungs were too complex to replicate.
Right.
And this guy says that they can adapt anybody's lungs to work on Neelix.
Right.
So replicate a pair of lungs, a set of human lungs.
Oh, why do you have to take it from someone? I see.
Rather than take them from someone, then convert them.
That's a good question. Yeah, we don't cover that for sure.
Have they got any of the bodies left over from episode 1?
Oh, no. But that's a good question.
Yeah.
The other thing that's funny in the scene is the alien, he can barely speak because of this crazy makeup, which is kind of funny. When he gets a speech, it's like, oh, what?
Were you watching that with subtitles on?
I always have subtitles on. Kes immediately volunteers, of course, to give up one of her lungs, though Neelix protests. She says, "You've done so much for me. Just let me do something for you for once." What exactly has he done for her? I have no idea.
Yeah. Apart from being like a complete red flag boyfriend.
I have no idea what that meant. Janeway gives him some encouragement, saying he can keep his kitchen for now.
That was very nice of her.
Yeah. Well, next scene, the transplant was a success, and we're heading out of the asteroid and resuming the trip home. We didn't get any dilithium, so this entire mission was not a good use of time.
Yeah. #failure.
The doctor has gotten permission to begin training Kes as a medical assistant, if she's interested, and she says, of course she is.
The doctor seemed pretty happy with the idea of a replacement for Paris.
Yeah, he does not like Tom.
Yeah.
Well, he tells Kes that she's given him a lot to think about. The end. Do you have overanalysis?
Yes, I do. First point, I thought it was strange that these people only took Neelix's lungs if they were searching for replacement organs. Because if they're so desperate for them, Neelix had lots of useful parts they could have used. So I think it might be a pointer to how awful these people are, that not only are they organ leggers and organ thieves, they're also wasteful.
Well, it also just might be that they didn't have enough time, because Chakotay and Harry were closing in on them.
Oh.
And so they were making at least this guy was making a quick decision to get the thing he needed and then get out of there. Because he does have a room full of organs.
That's true.
So he obviously does take things.
Yeah.
But I think he just ran out of time.
Okay. I'll accept that one. Maybe stun Neelix and drag him into his little secret area?
Yeah. Might not be strong enough. He looked like he was in pretty bad shape, too.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Next thing, the phage. Is it really a disease? They said it's been happening for over 2 millennia. And before this, their people's greatest achievements were artistic. And Matura, he was the second guy who got the lungs, was a sculptor of note. Does this mean Matura is over 2,000 years old? Is the phage really just aging, and these people are trying to artificially extend their lifespan by harvesting other living creatures? The phage is just aging, and these are morally bankrupt organ thieves who want to live forever.
I mean, it certainly could be.
Yeah.
But the one guy did say that the virus was rewriting their genetic code.
Yeah.
But then how are they even managing to procreate?
Right. Exactly. This is why I think that what we're looking at here is basically people who are wanting to achieve some form of immortality.
That's terrible.
Oh, I think they're already awful people.
Well, because we didn't do the thing of, when we beamed you on board, we scanned for viruses or whatever. We didn't have that conversation.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, with the transporter. Yeah. Huh.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing. Hopefully, and I mentioned this earlier, they pulled every piece of medical tech from that ship before letting it go.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah, think of the wealth of information. It's a fair trade. You give us everything, or you'll fall out of an airlock.
At the very least, keep that taser.
Oh, yeah. And as this is a warp-capable technology, I don't think you would be impacting the Prime Directive.
Well, is it impacting the Prime Directive if you take something more advanced and advance the human race or advance the Federation?
I would say in this situation, I think you're covered.
Yeah.
Then again, I have a lower moral threshold than Janeway, I think.
Yeah.
And my final point is, so if that facility, the organ-legging facility, was powered by dilithium, couldn't they just take any of the dilithium that they had there?
Yeah.
So at least they get something out of it.
Yeah, take it for their trouble.
Yeah.
I was wondering the same thing. And how did Neelix know there was a planetoid with dilithium, but then it really wasn't a planet with dilithium? Was it actually a trap that they set up for Neelix specifically because they knew a Talaxian that his lungs would be compatible?
Yeah. I took it as just that Neelix had scanned it in the past, or someone else had scanned it and Neelix had got that information. So he passed it on. Because Voyager had the same problem when they scanned it. They thought there was dilithium there. So I don't know if it was a trap as such, or it really did just register as a source of dilithium.
Okay.
And that, I think, wraps up my overanalysis.
I thought it was interesting that DS9 also had a virus episode in the first handful of episodes in season 1.
They did.
I mean, I feel like this would be the real problem with all of space travel. We just have to ignore it to have a show.
Yeah. Completely.
We can't have Star Trek if everything is going to give the crew a virus and kill them.
Every week would be a different crew.
But there was that show, was it on Netflix, where that happened, right? Everything they touched was a virus and kept killing them.
Oh, I don't remember.
It was a terrible show anyway. It was the one with Katie Sackhoff. It was awful. It doesn't matter. We talked about the captain having private dining quarters.
Yep.
So this entire episode is Neelix's fault.
Correct.
And he's not the greatest character. First, he's a bit goofy, but then he has this sort of really dark side now that we've seen, this ugly jealousy, especially when his supposed love of his life lives for such a small amount of time. Why does he have to control absolutely everything about it? That is terrible.
Controlling boyfriend, red flag.
And plus, he insisted going along on the away mission, and then he didn't follow orders. And then he ended up getting injured. I mean, if you're going to go on the mission, you need to listen to the person in charge of the mission. Right. This is all his fault.
That's a good summary.
Blaming the victim.
I think a big part of it is they don't really know quite what to do with Neelix yet. He's, out of all the characters, he is the most information. I think most of the other characters at this point have a fairly good handle on what they are. Whereas Neelix, I think, is very much up in the air of they're not sure what he's going to be. Is he going to be this wacky, funny guy? Is he going to have a more serious age? Are they going to use him to tell serious stories? There's an element of where Neelix fits in the show.
I mean, we talked about that on Deep Space Nine a lot, of things that they started with and things that finish completely differently from how they started. Like maybe they weren't sure.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably it. Of all of the characters, Neelix is the most Neelix. That's what I would say. But he's definitely a wild card. And he's a wild card in an uncomfortable way.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what it is, but that jealousy streak was really off-putting. Yeah. But there's just something about him. I don't find him, he's not a comfortable character on my starship. Yeah. It made sense when you had those people on the space station because it wasn't a starship. It wasn't a starship or a Starfleet space station in Deep Space Nine. Yeah. What is this guy even doing here? Well, if I go to women in the future, sticking with Neelix, the jealousy is grotesque. I mean, again, she is the grown-up and he's the child. She only lives 9 years and she ends up with this ridiculously jealous, controlling boyfriend. And now she's even given him one of her lungs. I mean, what more must she do? This is not a healthy two-sided relationship.
No.
As discussed.
Yeah.
Then I will go to Janeway's leadership corner. And I really felt like she was a little careless in this episode. She shot at the cave wall with 0 seconds of thinking, and she did that thing where she was like, I considered all the options and we're just going to go into the asteroid. She has a real Kirk streak to her that makes this show so different from The Next Generation, right, to be sure. But she's still an absolute commanding presence, which I really appreciate about her. And I wonder if that's sort of how they were trying to write it. Like she's, we have to overcompensate for the fact that it's a female captain.
Oh, interesting.
By having her being overly confident and overly sure of herself and willing to step into every dangerous situation, whether it made sense or not. And we didn't have to do that with Picard because he was a man.
I'm going to throw out an idea here. Do you think that the way Janeway is written is because of the complaints about the captains not being Kirk? We haven't had a Kirk character since the original series.
I mean, I don't know. It would make sense because she is very Kirk-like.
But we know there was the gatekeepers, the fans, who didn't like Picard.
The so-called fans.
Who didn't like Picard, who didn't like Sisko, because they were walking around talking about their feelings.
Well,
and this is a character that you can basically go, yeah, it's a Kirk-type captain. It's that action captain to appeal to that fan base. So the writing is specifically written to appeal to that aspect of the fan base.
Maybe. I mean, maybe. I guess it's entirely possible. But because we haven't seen the emotional side of her really yet. Yeah. There's a little hint of it in the first episode. But we shouldn't listen to those fans. They don't know what they're talking about. Yeah. We need humans of all types and characters of all types in Star Trek. So, yes, maybe that is the case. We talked about this, that we can really tell that this is a purposeful departure from Deep Space Nine. Yep. And it's more going back to the type of episodes are more going back to TNG. Yep. But the type of the overarching story is much more TOS because we're in areas unknown, we're on our own, we don't have protocols and rules for everything yet because everything is just so strange and new, and we have this confident, aggressive captain. So when you look at it that way, it is kind of a merger of those two previous things to combat whatever people were saying about Deep Space Nine. I don't know, though, if it's about what the fans were saying and doing or if it was an internal struggle with the people who made Star Trek.
Oh, interesting.
Because if you watch any of those documentaries from that time period, there was a huge struggle going on about keeping the Roddenberry vision, and also the Roddenberry vision was too boring, right? So there were a lot of struggles going on.
But there was also the pressures from the network about the viewing statistics and how they wanted more viewers.
Yeah, no, that's true. But they were still willing to step a little bit outside by having a couple of lead female characters in this show. So they weren't completely kowtowing to maybe what somebody would have been saying to them.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Okay. This one's kind of tough because I honestly am varying between neutral and just a thumbs up.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
Because I feel in a lot of ways it's almost a nothing burger, and there were some plot holes in it, and I feel it was almost like what was the point of this episode exactly? You know what I mean? If it was to expand Neelix, he didn't come off looking very good.
No, yeah.
So, despite the fact it had awesome makeup on the guys with the phage, they looked horrific. I'm going to go with a neutral rating.
I am very surprised. I think this is a great episode.
Really?
I really liked it. Yeah, I'm absolutely giving it a thumbs up. I, again, remembered this episode, but not the ending.
Oh.
So once again, I was like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And Janeway is so good in that scene with the phage guys.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I was watching that, or at least at the end of that scene. I mean, she's so good. It's not just like even one thing that she says. She says like 3 great things, and the way she delivers it is so good. And you can tell how frustrated she is. And she doesn't like the fact that she has to just sort of let them go and let Neelix die. She hates that, but she does it. And then it turns out differently. When I got through that scene, I was like, wait, is this my favorite Star Trek show? Is Janeway? Is that my favorite captain? Have I been lying to myself all along thinking that it's Picard and the Next Gen? I don't know. This is like a comfort show to me. Right. I am, every episode I have really enjoyed. So thumbs up.
Wow.
Kate Mulgrew, I mean, freaking amazing. I don't know. I just think she's great.
I cannot disagree that Mulder really did make that scene, but I don't think that one scene manages to pull it up enough. I mean, it's not bad, but I kind of feel like I expect more.
I mean, I liked everything about it, even the crappy stuff with Neelix, because I just think it showed he's a terrible person and a terrible boyfriend. And it's just, it's like it illuminated that. But that panic scene, the claustrophobic scene, I thought was very good because I feel like I've experienced that. And so we talk about this all the time. Some things just work for some people and they don't work for others. We've had so many conversations where we were like, oh my gosh, this was terrible. And then we get an email from someone saying, oh, this is exactly what happened in my life. This is one of my favorite episodes. And you just think, oh, okay. I hadn't looked at it that way. And I think there's a lot of that in this episode for me. I just related to it and I liked it.
Interesting. Okay. Am I being too harsh?
No, you're allowed your opinion. I just think at the end of each episode, I'm going to have to ask myself that question. Is this my favorite Star Trek?
Oh, dear.
After 5 episodes, I'm like, I don't know. Now I'm confused. Now we're going to have to go back and watch The Next Generation after this. Right. Not exactly torture. We'll do that curated thing again where we'll just pull out the good episodes and watch them.
Oh, I'm totally down with that. Except we have very different opinions on Inner Light.
That is true. Not my favorite episode.
Probably one of my favorite TNG episodes.
Okay, let's wrap up.
Okay.
That is it for Season 1, Episode 5. Come back next week for Episode 6. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own over-analysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at ReBingeIT@gmail.com. You can also find us on the thing that used to be called Twitter and Threads and Instagram and YouTube, all at ReBingeIT. You can join the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast.
Also known as ReBingeIT. And that's it for me.
And that's it from me.